The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Victorian house, casting delicate shadows across the hardwood floors. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison stood at the kitchen window, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, watching the dew sparkle on the roses in the back garden. At 28, she had never imagined her life would take such an unexpected turn. 6 months ago, she had been drowning in debt. Medical bills from her mother's long illness had piled up like autumn leaves, each envelope bringing fresh despair. The small apartment she shared with her younger brother Marcus had become a constant reminder of everything they couldn't afford. Heat in winter, groceries that lasted the whole month, textbooks for Marcus's college courses, everything seemed just beyond their reach. That's when she met Walter Harrison. Walter was 72 years old, with silver hair that caught the light and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He owned the bookstore where Sarah had taken a part-time job, hoping to make ends meet. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she would dust the shelves and help customers find their perfect reads, while Walter sat behind the old oak counter, reading classics and sipping Earl Grey tea. Their conversations started small. Comments about the weather, recommendations for books she might enjoy. But gradually, something deeper grew between them. Walter spoke of loneliness that echoed through his empty house, of children who lived far away and visited twice a year. Sarah found herself sharing her fears about the future, her dreams of finishing her teaching degree, her worry about Marcus. When Walter proposed, it wasn't with flowers and romance. It was with honesty, sitting in his study surrounded by towering bookshelves. He offered her security, a chance to pay off the debts and help Marcus graduate. She offered him companionship, someone to share meals with, someone to fill the quiet spaces in his large house. It doesn't have to be about love, he had said gently. Sometimes, partnership is enough. Sarah had accepted, knowing in her heart that she was marrying for practical reasons. The guilt followed her down the aisle of the small church, past the handful of guests, and into this house that smelled of old books and lavender sachets. Now, 6 months later, she stood in Walter's kitchen, their kitchen, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The house was beautiful, with its high ceilings and original crown molding. The garden was Walter's pride and joy, filled with heirloom roses and carefully tended herb beds. Marcus was thriving at college, his tuition paid and his future bright. The debt that had once kept Sarah awake at night was gone, erased by Walter's quiet generosity. But late at night, when Walter was asleep in his room down the hall, they had separate bedrooms, an arrangement they had both agreed upon. Sarah sometimes felt like a stranger in her own life. "Good morning, dear." Walter's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. Sarah turned to find him standing in the doorway, already dressed in his usual cardigan and pressed slacks. He moved slowly these days, his arthritis bothering him more as autumn approached. "Good morning, Walter. How did you sleep?" "Well enough." He made his way to the coffee pot, his movements careful but purposeful. "I was thinking we might work in the garden today. The roses need their final pruning before winter." Sarah nodded, watching as he prepared his coffee with the same ritual he followed every morning. 2 spoonfuls of sugar, just a splash of cream. She had memorized his habits, learned to anticipate his needs, but sometimes she wondered if he truly saw her as more than a helpful companion. They worked in the garden together as the morning warmed. Walter showed her how to cut the rose stems at just the right angle, how to recognize which branches would survive the cold months ahead. His hands, though lined with age, were steady and sure. He spoke softly about each plant, sharing stories of where they had come from when he had planted them. "This one," he said, touching a climbing rose with deep red blooms, "I planted the year my wife died. 23 years ago now. She loved roses, but never lived to see this one bloom." Sarah looked up from her pruning, surprised. Walter rarely spoke about his first wife, Margaret. She knew only the basic facts. They had been married for 35 years, had 2 children together, and that she had died of cancer. "She must have been very special," Sarah said gently. Walter was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands still on the rose stem. "She was. We grew up together, you know. Married young, built a life together. When she died, I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd just exist until it was my time to go." Something in his voice made Sarah stop her work entirely. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the elderly man she had married for security, but someone who had loved deeply and lost everything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know this isn't what you had with her. I know this isn't real for you either." Walter turned to face her, his eyes soft but serious. "Sarah, may I tell you something?" She nodded, her heart suddenly racing. "These past months, watching you move through this house, seeing you laugh with Marcus when he visits, sharing quiet dinners together, it's brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "It may not have started as love, but it's becoming something beautiful. At least, it is for me." Sarah felt her breath catch. "Walter, You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that you're not just helping an old man pass his remaining years. You're giving me a reason to tend this garden, to plan for next spring's plantings, to hope that we'll see these roses bloom together again." Tears gathered in Sarah's eyes as she looked at this man she had married for all the wrong reasons and was beginning to love for all the right ones. The guilt she had carried for months began to shift, transforming into something else: gratitude, affection, and yes, the tender beginnings of love. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that I was taking advantage of your kindness, that I was living a lie. We were both lonely, Sarah. We both needed something the other could give. There's no shame in that." Walter reached out and took her dirt-stained hand in his. "But what we have now, this companionship, this care we show each other, that's real. That's worth something." As autumn progressed into winter, Sarah began to see their marriage differently. She noticed how Walter saved the best parts of the newspaper for her to read. How he made sure her favorite tea was always stocked in the pantry. How his eyes lit up when she shared stories from the elementary school where she now taught, her degree finally completed. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the way he listened to her dreams and fears with complete attention. She began to see past the practical arrangement they had made to the genuine affection that had grown between them. On Christmas morning, as snow fell softly outside the kitchen window, Sarah and Walter sat together at the table, sharing coffee and cinnamon rolls. Marcus was there too, full of stories from his final semester of college, his future as bright as the winter sun streaming through the glass. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly to Walter as Marcus stepped outside to call his girlfriend. "For what, my dear?" "For showing me that love doesn't always start with passion. Sometimes it starts with kindness, and grows into something even more beautiful." Walter smiled, the same gentle expression she had grown to cherish. "Thank you for giving an old man's heart a reason to keep beating strongly." Outside, the garden slept under its blanket of snow, waiting for spring. But inside, in the warm kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and coffee, two hearts that had found each other in the most unexpected way continued to bloom, creating something entirely their own, a love built on honesty, nurtured by kindness, and destined to grow stronger with each passing season.